Welcome to Butterflies of Wisdom, everyone. Today, I guess I should say I'm honored to be trading interviews here with Mr. Evan Schmitt, who runs the Get Creative podcast, which can be found in iTunes, which yours truly is going to be on the Get Creative podcast, and how we did that one was through voice memos on an iPhone. Yes, voice memos can work on an iPhone. Typically what Evan does is he has the guest record on their end, and then he piecemeals it together. I don't know how Mr. Evan does that, but Mr. Evan is a phenomenal voice. You'll say to me, man, you'll now have a radio voice on your podcast, but he is so phenomenal, and his podcast is phenomenal too. So without further ado, I'm going to let Evan Schmitt take it away.
Well, thanks for having me on, Wynn. I'm very flattered by your kind words, and so I'm a podcast host. I'm a voice actor. I'm a husband. I'm a dog dad. I'm a brother, son, a lot of things. And I have a day job working at a grocery store here in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. And in my side hustle, I do the voice acting. I do the voiceover work. So I'm the voice of really whatever story people want me to tell. So it could be an internal training video for a corporation. It could be a small nonprofit commercial. It could be an audiobook. It's really whatever. I'm utilitarian. I try not to pigeonhole myself in one sort of thing, but I'm really just telling story for people who want their story told, and they want it told in a specific voice. And with the internet, you can be anywhere and nowhere at the same time. So I have clients all over the world, and really, if they speak my language, English, then we can work together. So that's kind of what I do. And then I have a podcast, Get Creative, where I interview other creative types of people, whether it's you, an author, or a video producer, or an actor, or an entrepreneur who has a 20-year-old startup and still thinks he hasn't arrived yet, even though he's been around for 20 years in the same company. Everybody kind of has a story to tell, and they love talking about themselves, and they just share something important that they've learned in their life as an entrepreneur and a creative person, and kind of maybe their hack for creating things. And so I share that on my podcast, and learned a lot so far. I have 25 episodes, and so it's about almost 6 months old, and I'm really glad I started it. It's been a really good journey. I've met amazing people. Wouldn't have met you without it, because I interviewed Kelly Collins, who's been on your show, and she immediately recommended you. So we wouldn't be here right now talking if it weren't for the podcast.
Well, there we go. And what has been your favorite podcast interview you have done? I know I just picked your favorite child question, but what has been your favorite podcast interview? And then I'm going to throw my 2 cents in here from a listener.
So to be honest, this is my first one. I'm relatively new to being interviewed on podcasts, and so this is my favorite. I never get to talk about myself, and I'm really humble, but I'm secretly a little arrogant. But I try to, So this is my favorite, hands down.
This is your favorite because there's a first time for everything, and once we kind of let the cat out of the bag today that you have a podcast, because I don't think your podcast was well known in the sea of podcasts until today. And so my favorite episode of your podcast, and yes, I did listen to Kelly, by the way, but the talent agent that you had on had fascinating information. I don't know where you got him from, but I'm like, wow.
Yeah, I think, I don't know how I found out about Will Ball, but I think it was on Twitter. I saw that his agency was relatively new, and being the talent that I am, the voice actor, you submit your stuff to agents because they're people who can help you find work. It's a mutual beneficial relationship. And when they find you work, they get a little piece of the commission for putting in the footwork, doing the negotiating on the financial side and all that. So I just reached out to him, and we started talking, and then, I popped the question and said, hey, you want to be on my podcast? Like, I haven't had a talent agent yet. And he's like, yeah, sure. And I was like, wow, that's amazing. You never have time. Agents are like the New York Minute kind of people where they're like, don't have time for this. The house is on fire. We got to go. All right, bye. That kind of stuff.
Exactly. No, he sat with you, and I was just about to say that. Nor do traditional book agents have the time for all their clients. That's why I am sticking with the self-publishing industry, because I'm realizing that the traditional publishing industry isn't all that cracked up to be. But I was just about to say, getting a talent agent on a podcast is phenomenal.
Well, thank you. And I can also sympathize with the self-publishing. I self-published 2 ebooks last year, and like the overhead was nothing. It was just me spending some time writing my thoughts, and I wrote 2 different books that I just wanted to get out there. One of them is a free ebook about marketing for voiceover talent, and another one is kind of my thoughts and a how-to guide for young entrepreneurs. And it's just the stuff I learned as a teenager 10 years ago, of kind of like how to start your own business and really get going. And that one's on there. And then I made audiobooks of them, and they're on Audible too. So.
How cool is that?
But yeah, self-publishing is totally it, because you don't have to pay anything, and you're not getting distributed like you would with a big publisher, but if it's what you make it. So if you put in the effort of marketing yourself and finding the right channels to push it out there, you can have a bigger return on investment, I think.
Yeah, exactly. Now, have you ever said to yourself, I don't want to get behind this podcasting, like, oh joy, here we go again? Or is your podcast so quick that, and when I say quick, your podcast is one of the quickest podcasts I listen to. And so is your podcast so quick that you think that it would be cool to share your journey with millennials?
You mean as far as like the quickness of the why the podcast is so quick? Or
I mean, do you ever feel like I don't want to do this anymore? I really want to pull this podcast off of iTunes and be done with it. That's what I mean.
I guess I don't think I've ever gotten to that point. I have thought about kind of, you have the days where you kind of question what you're doing, especially when it's a day when you have a lot of time, or when you don't have a lot of time. Sorry about that. When you don't have a lot of time and you're really questioning, like, I'm spending so much time on this. But that was kind of why I designed it to be so short, is because, like, some weeks I get bogged down with a lot of bookings, and that's really good because I'm spending time in front of the mic getting paid, which is what I want to do. But it's nice to have the podcast sort of, so it's really manageable and consumable for me, so that it would really take a lot to be overwhelmed. So it's a weekly, I produce a show every week, and I try to make it less than 10-minute episodes. I try to not cut anything. And I've thought, like, what's the point of this? But it's the mentality of, it's not a sprint, it's a marathon, and it's sort of one handshake at a time, one brick at a time to build the house. And, you never know where relationships are going to lead. And if you're patient, those relationships may blossom into something you could have never imagined. So, you know, I could get a book deal in 10 years, or you could get a book deal and you could get a talk show in 10 years. And that framework was built, that brick was laid, 10 years ago. And
yeah,
it's part of the ever-growing network of people that you grow and meet. I'm only 26, and I think back to the amount of people that I've met, and I know I'm connected with some of them on LinkedIn, and it's over 500. And I look back, I'm like, I don't even know how I met all these people. Like, it's awesome. That's part of being human, is interacting and connecting with people. And a lot of it is like, Rome wasn't built in a day, and it wasn't built by one person. So it's the same way with building a business, a career. You just have to depend on others and help and pay it forward, and not really expect anything in return, because if you go into it with that mentality, you're just going to be like, what's in it for me? Whereas, like, if I just give, the earth will give back. If you push on the earth, something pushes back. Right? You throw the basketball down, the basketball bounces back.
Yeah, exactly. If you put out a good podcast, the podcast family will give back. And if you put out incredible voiceover work, the voiceover industry would give it back too. And now, what's the most challenging part of being a side hustler and having a full-time job?
It's committing. So, I'm married. I have a house. I am a landlord because we rent one half of the duplex that we live in. And, it's finding the time to commit every single day. So, like, the whole last year, I committed to emailing a certain amount of people a day in my demo, because I had a realization that even though I had a lot of agents in my corner that I was on the roster of, like, unless you push the ball, like the snowball up the hill, to use a snow analogy, it's only going to get bigger if you do something, and it's only going to be you. And it's really selfish to say that, but it's really like everybody has their own thing to do, even if it's your closest people, like your family. But it's got to come from you if you really want to make it happen, if you want to see some change happen. So the biggest hurdle to overcome was just committing to it, even if it was like 5 minutes in a day, because we were, traveling or driving across the country, or it was a really hectic day where the air conditioner broke and I had to troubleshoot that and spend hours with a technician, still finding that time to carve out and just say, like, 5 minutes, I'm going to do something that's going to have forward progress with the business and entrepreneurship and something. And so it's just finding the commitment.
So it's just finding the commitment. And did you, if you don't mind me asking, did you get a degree in college in voiceover work, or how did you discover your passion for voiceover work?
So I'll make this story quick because it can get kind of long. Let's see. I was 15 years old, and I was really into making movies, and I had the privilege to meet a filmmaking legend in the skiing world, the downhill skiing world. I met Warren Miller at a summer camp for mountain biking, and he saw some of my little montages that I was putting together. This was like 2005, and he said, "This is great. Put together a product, like make a movie and create a product. Like, don't just create these little videos, but like make something that you could sell to somebody." And so I did that, and I emulated what he did, which was narrate his films sort of as a chronological travelogue of a year of racing bicycles. And so I did that, and that was my first voiceover stuff. And then I went to college. I went to the University of Washington in Seattle, and I studied communication. I took one acting course, didn't think about it. I got on the college radio station there, hosted a show, left college. I went to the eastern part of the state, Washington State in Pullman, and got a job on air as an announcer at the the public radio station there, and I really got into it, but I didn't really like radio because it was really high stress, and I just couldn't handle it. There was a lot of terrible news going on at the time, and I just didn't want to do that. And then my wife and I moved to Pittsburgh, just to, that's a whole other story. But then I started to explore the voiceover stuff more, and like the freelancer sites were popping up, and I was finding little tiny narration jobs on there, and I figured out that, you know, if you put your mind to it, you really put your best foot forward, and you have a really good demo, and you find the right buyers, you can do a lot with it, and you can make some decent money and really explore your artistic talent with the voice. And so that's what I did, is I pursued it a little bit more and used my communication degree, and yeah, here I am.
There you are. And I just wanted to throw a tip out to my listeners / to my interviewee. Have you heard of ACX.com? ACX is owned by Amazon. That is a huge site for voiceover work. You can find anyone to voiceover books. So you mentioned books earlier. You may want to look into ACX. And then on the other end, for people that have manuscripts that want you to do voiceover work for them, all they have to do is upload the manuscript. You have to accept it, of course, but then ACX does all the middleman work for you. They can either do a 50-50 commission split, or they can either do a flat fee.
Yeah, I really like ACX. So when I started really taking ACX a little bit more serious, a year ago when I made my ebooks, it was really helpful to have a self-published book that I can narrate myself, because I could figure out what standards ACX had for sound, because that's really important to know the bar that you have to hit. And so when I did that with my book, my wife built my studio, which is in my bedroom closet, which is where I'm talking from right now. And to know that my studio was good enough for ACX, it was really good to know that, so that I could have the confidence to approach any other project, which I haven't approached any projects right now because audiobooks are really time intensive. But it was good to know that, you know, I had every tool that I needed in my own toolbox and could do it myself to be able to produce an audiobook quality work. So ACX is great. I'm getting royalties right now. It's really nice to have ACX.
As we do this podcast, you are getting royalties from your own book. And that's why I don't narrate my own books. Now you guys know my secret, why I let other people narrate my books. Because as Evan just said, audiobooks are time intensive, and I don't have a strong enough voice to do it. I have decided, I said to myself, I was going to narrate one of my last books, which is now being edited, and I'm like, you don't have a strong enough voice to do it. You need a strong voice and a lot of time to do it.
Yeah. Yeah, and the equipment too. If you have the equipment in the house, it's really helpful. But if you don't, then it's going to be a lot of fees to rent a studio. And ACX makes it super easy to connect the producers with the talent to read the books. And yeah, it's cool that the platform exists.
And now, what is your favorite podcast? Please don't say you don't listen to podcasts just because you produce one. I'd
have to say my favorite right now is by this entrepreneur, Gary Vaynerchuk, and he's sort of he's really this isn't the first time you're hearing this. Yeah, he's great. And it's interesting because I got promoted to a buyer position at my day job 6 months ago. Before that, I was doing a lot of podcasts. I was doing a lot of WTF with Mark Maron, Freakonomics, Planet Money. When it was coming out, Serial with Sarah Koenig, that was amazing. But yeah, Gary Vaynerchuk is really all I have to listen to right now, and your podcast, of course, because
Of course.
I just find that I'm using my mind more at work. Instead of stocking shelves, I gotta project how much half gallons of milk I'm gonna sell in a weekend. I gotta place my order for Sunday night on Friday afternoon. So I gotta think more. So I'm really limited on my consumption of podcasts. But yeah, Gary Vaynerchuk.
Hey, that's okay. I mean, it doesn't have to be podcast all the time. People think I listen to a lot of podcasts, and I'm here to tell you I have my favorites, but I don't listen to a lot of podcasts while I'm at work because, as Evan said, you have to concentrate on a day job. So I listen to a lot of podcasts after work. Once I hit the after work time, then I do listen to a lot of podcasts. But that's right. And what would be your best advice for a millennial listening to this right now, thinking that I want to do a side hustle or I want to eventually venture out of my day job? What would be your best advice?
You're going to be afraid, and use your fear to your advantage as much as you can. You're going to have days where you're really afraid of what you're doing and really afraid of cold calling people or really afraid of reading that email. And it's all just about overcoming it because everybody has to overcome it. Steve Jobs, he probably had fear when he first started his business and he had to approach the people with the money, the buyers. Every business has a buyer. Every business has a seller. And no business ever survives without making sales. So you have to be really good at making sales. You have to be afraid to make mistakes. You have to be that doesn't mean you have to not be afraid to make mistakes. There we go. That came out better. You have to be able to fail and let yourself do that and learn from it because you learn more when you fail than when you succeed. When you succeed, you don't learn anything. I used to race my bicycle competitively, and you learn so much more when you didn't win the race than if you did win the race. Because if you won the race, you don't know, you could have gotten super lucky. Everybody else could have had a flat tire in the last mile of the race, and then you ended up winning. So when you make mistakes, you do that. But then the great thing in business is that if you do have a win somewhere, if you succeed at something, you can also dissect that too. But when you fail as quick as you can figure out what works and what doesn't work and what you need to stop doing right away. Because then if you do know that, then you can stop doing that. If your website is the wrong color, or if your email comes off a certain way, or if, you're not keeping clients coming back, that's also a good thing because acquiring a new client is really hard. Whereas keeping somebody happy who knows the work you do and knows how you work and how quickly you work, that's a whole lot easier than trying to acquire a whole new client. So,
especially in the voiceover industry, there is a sea of voiceover artists that you could work with. So keeping a client happy is easier said than done, and acquiring a new client is tougher than nails because there's a sea of voiceover artists. And so you said that so eloquently, Evan, that I truly believe what you say, and I truly agree with you. Keeping the client happy is the easiest thing on the planet. Keeping the boss happy is not so easy, especially when you're not concentrating on your work But when it's the other way around and keeping the client happy, that's the easiest thing in the world.
Yeah.
Yes, that's the easiest thing in the world. So, Evan, where can people find your amazing podcast? And where can people find you and your amazing voiceover work? And how can they reach out to you?
All right. Let's see. The podcast is called Get Creative. There's new episodes each Tuesday, and you can find that wherever you get your podcasts, whether it's Stitcher, whether it's Google Play, whether it's iTunes. Let's see. You can find me. I'm on Twitter at Evan Schmitt. I'm on LinkedIn. I'm also, my website, that's the best place to find me. It's evanschmitt.com, EvanSchmitt. The second T is silent. And, yeah, you can find everything on there. You can find the ebooks. You can find the films I made as a teenager. They're up there for digital download if you want to cringe and listen to my 16-year-old narration. And my direct line is evan@evanschmitt.com, and I'm pretty good about responding to emails, but I try to turn off after like 6 or 7 p.m. Eastern time, just because you gotta have the balance, you gotta turn off the email. And I always talk to people who are salary, or I have coworkers who are on salary, and I'm on hourly, and I look at them and I'm like, oh my gosh, they look so burned. And I hope I never get like that. I grew up in a household with, my dad's a doctor, and he would, work 70, 80-hour weeks, and he'd be on call 4 nights a week. And I've seen what that does, and I don't want that for me. I want to have the highest ROI possible on my money.
Yes.
On my time.
Yes. On your life too. I mean,
right.
That's what I've adjusted my part-time job as a teacher to only work 2 days a week in the morning, and that's it for me. And it's not because of my disability. It's because of I'm in education, and it's because my psyche couldn't handle it. I am way too creative. I like to teach about cerebral palsy as a whole, as if I was 9 to 5, I don't think I could do it. Plus, I have to be really careful with my disability as to sit at a desk all day. I need to move. I need to go to the gym in the middle of the day, but we want the highest return on our lives and our bodies to be happy, because we only get one body.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So
they say sitting is the new smoking.
Oh God! Don't tell me that. Don't tell me that.
So I go to work at 6 in the morning because I start at 6 and I end at 2, which is great because I have the afternoon to do stuff. But I'll get into work, and I bike to work. But I'll get to work, and if I sit down within that first half hour, I start to go back into sleep mode. So I try to stay on my feet as much as possible, because sitting it's in my head, it breeds laziness, and laziness doesn't get stuff done. Whereas if you stay on the feet and you hustle, and then, you get stuff done sooner, and then you have more time to sit later. So.
Yeah. Yes. They say sitting is the new smoking. So move as you're listening to podcasts. Only sit at your desk for 1 hour. If you need to do something really important, just move and don't sit. Don't sit. And I know you guys like to listen to podcasts at the gym. I know you do. But as long as you're moving, we're happy that you're moving, because the body wasn't designed to sit. That's a whole nother podcast in itself, why I am moving as much as I do and keeping my mobility. But so, Evan, I'm going to turn the mic over to you, and let you ask me 2 to 3 questions that you want to ask me.
What on your toughest days, what gets you going in the morning?
Oh, on my toughest days, which if I can find in my as I open up my eyes, if I can find my favorite podcast, that gets me going in the morning. And Get Creative is one of my favorite podcasts, and I'm not just being nice. It truly is. And so if I can find my favorite podcast and my coffee, that would get me going. Other than that, I live with my dad, and because I'm disabled, and my dad goes, "You're so chipper in the morning. How could that be?" And I'm like, because I rely on a lot of help to get through my day, and people know that by now. But on my tough days, my favorite podcast and a cup of coffee gets me going in this. And then I'm perfectly fine. Most people say don't talk to me until after I had my coffee, and I say don't talk to me until 2 minutes into the podcast, and then you can talk to me. But that's my little mantra. Do not talk to Win unless she's had at least 2 minutes with the favorite podcast. But other than that, on my toughest days, that's what keeps me going and gets me going.
Okay. And then I still have one more question, right?
Yes.
Okay. What's one thing you want to accomplish in the next 12 months?
Getting a journalism degree. Honestly, getting a journalism degree, which that application process starts next week, thank God, because I'm like, if I'm going to be doing this much work podcasting, I might as well use a degree that I might as well get a degree that I'll actually use, because a lot of millennials are paying off thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars in school debt, and then they're not using the degrees that the schools have given them.
Yeah.
Yep. It doesn't go, yep. Here we go again. So that's my biggest accomplishment in the next 12 months is to start the journalism degree process.
That'll be a journey.
That will be a journey, and I'm hoping that I can do it. I'm thinking that I can do it, but we'll see. We'll see. But that's going to be an interesting journey because of everything that's going on right now. But I think with my portfolio in voice work, podcasting work, I think I'm a good fit for journalism, I think. And so that's going to be an interesting journey, and my fan base knows that. They just don't know that I want to start accomplishing that in the next 12 months.
Well, just make sure you're prepared for anything and everything, because you never know. Never know what might happen.
Yes, that's great advice. That's great advice. You never know what might happen after I get this journalism degree. I mean, I started this podcast, and we all did, without the journalism background, and now I'm finally going back to school to get a journalism degree, so yay me. And so here we go in interesting journey in journalism. So, Evan, I really, really, really appreciate your time. Again, Evan's podcast is called Get Creative. As Evan said, his podcast could be found in any podcast app, whether it be Stitcher, whether it be iTunes, whether it be SoundCloud, whether it be on his website. I'm pretty sure he has his podcast hooked up to his website, or at least there's some subscribe button. And I'm going to say this on behalf of Evan and myself, because soon-to-be journalists, even if you don't have a journalism degree, we would appreciate a review. It doesn't have to be 5 stars by any means, but we would appreciate a review of both the Get Creative podcast and the Butterflies of Wisdom podcast. And we have some exciting stuff coming up on Butterflies of Wisdom, which I'll share tomorrow. So I am super excited for that. And I really appreciate Evan's time. This podcast is sponsored by Kitter, Kitter, which can be found in the show notes. Kitter is a Twitter hashtagging app only on desktop. They're developing an iOS app, and what Kitter does is put the most trending hashtags with your tweets. So all you have to do is compose a tweet via Kitter, and they put the hashtags for it, so you don't get lost in the sea of Twitter-ness. So I would appreciate their sponsorship, as I always do. And Kellyanne Collins, which Evan mentioned earlier, she is the founder of Twitter. So if you want to go find her story, go listen to Get Creative, Kellyanne Collins, or go listen to Kelly's story twice on my episodes, and then you'll find out why she is the Twitter queen of Twitter. And this podcast is also sponsored by Grace by Grit. Grace by Grit is a clothing line out of California, and they're kindly giving you guys 20% off. And again, I thank Evan for his time tonight and his creative spirit, I should say. And I hope you guys enjoyed another fabulous episode. Thanks to you guys.
Thank you, Lynn.